They laughed at the mechanic who built a bunker. Then the world ended. Sarah Blake wasn't always an outsider. Once, she was just another face in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge, repairing engines in a grease-stained garage on Main Street. Folks knew her as the quiet mechanic, skilled with her tools, but strange in her ways, quietly obsessive about details nobody else noticed. Then, she began building beneath the mountain. At first, people ignored her eccentricities. They shrugged when trucks delivered steel beams to her remote property, dismissing it as a hobby. They whispered when concrete mixers appeared on the hillside, but assumed she was expanding her workshop. Even when the earth shook gently beneath their feet, they joked that Sarah had finally lost her mind. But laughter turned to suspicion when townsfolk realized the truth. Beneath the rocky hillside, Sarah Blake was constructing a fortress, a labyrinth of reinforced concrete tunnels, air filtration systems, hydroponic gardens, and sealed steel doors thicker than a car. What's she hiding from? They sneered in cafes and taverns. Aliens? Zombies? The government? Sarah never answered their jokes. She simply worked, silently and tirelessly, welding and digging and wiring, day after day, year after year. Her small frame hardened by labor, her mind sharpened by purpose. Eventually, the town stopped joking. They ignored her entirely, isolating the strange mechanic who saw danger where none existed. But Sarah knew better. She saw what they couldn't, or wouldn't. Rising temperatures, distant political turmoil, supply chain failures. She studied engineering manuals, meteorological reports, and geopolitical analyses. She saw the world teetering on the brink of collapse. And she understood one fundamental truth. When it fell, no one was coming to save Pine Ridge, except her. When the collapse came, it wasn't with fire or explosions, but with silence. It began subtly. Cell phones blinked no service and televisions displayed static. Vehicles stalled along Pine Ridge's roads, their engines dead as if drained of life. Credit cards failed and panic spread like frost over the valley. Residents turned to Sheriff Mason, the mayor, anyone in authority, but found no answers. Rumors trickled in from travelers on foot, haggard refugees who spoke of cities gone dark, military outposts abandoned, governments fallen overnight. The residents' confusion turned to fear, then desperation, as the realization set in. The outside world had collapsed. Stores emptied in hours. Neighbors fought over food. Violence simmered beneath every conversation. The thin veneer of civilization cracked. And then, at the darkest moment, they remembered Sarah Blake. The mechanic, the woman they mocked for years. Now they looked to the hills, eyes filled not with ridicule, but desperate hope. The bunker was no longer a joke. It was salvation. Sarah watched from behind reinforced glass monitors as Pine Ridge unraveled. Infrared cameras revealed people gathering at her gates, once neighbors, now frightened strangers. She pressed the intercom button, her voice firm but steady. Approach the gate slowly. Leave any weapons behind. They obeyed without hesitation, fear overcoming pride. Sarah activated the steel doors, hydraulic mechanisms humming softly as the gates opened, revealing tunnels illuminated by pale blue lights. The townspeople streamed inside, marveling at corridors of gleaming metal, hydroponic gardens filled with fresh vegetables, and walls lined with carefully organized medical supplies. They whispered in awe, but Sarah's demeanor silenced their questions. "Follow my instructions precisely," she ordered. "There is no margin for error." They complied, driven by instinctive survival. Their skepticism evaporated in the presence of their savior. Yet, even as she guided them to sleeping quarters and ration stations, Sarah's monitors pulsed with alerts. Something else was coming, something worse than collapse. Sensors along the mountain perimeter detected movement, organized, deliberate, human, armed. The bunker's true test had arrived. Outside the bunker, darkness deepened. Sheriff Mason stood at Sarah's side in the control room, eyes fixed on grainy drone footage. Hundreds of armed men and women advanced methodically up the valley, their vehicles bearing unfamiliar markings. Raiders, opportunists, marauders. "Who are they?" the sheriff whispered. "Predators," Sarah replied, her voice sharp. "They follow the collapse. They prey on the weak." Sarah activated defensive measures. Hidden turrets extended from camouflage panels, armed with high-intensity sonic disruptors. Motion-sensitive mines lay dormant beneath the surface. The marauders approached the outer perimeter, oblivious to Sarah's hidden defenses. "Last warning," Sarah's voice echoed through external speakers. Leave now." The invaders laughed, jeered, and moved forward confidently. Sarah gave no second chance. She activated the defenses. The valley erupted, not with bullets, but with waves of incapacitating sound. Raiders collapsed, clutching ears and screaming silently, their minds overwhelmed by non-lethal yet incapacitating pain. The survivors retreated, dragging fallen comrades confused and terrified by unseen defenses. But Sarah felt no satisfaction. This was only the first attack. She knew their next move would be brutal, lethal, and overwhelming. Her defenses would need more than sound to withstand what was coming next. And she wasn't certain the bunker or the people within could survive it. In the silence that followed the attack, Sarah didn't rest. She recalibrated defensive systems, redistributed resources, and fine-tuned oxygen and water filtration. Every calculation, every movement precise and controlled. But the residents of Pine Ridge grew restless. Their initial gratitude shifted slowly back toward suspicion. Sarah felt their doubts, saw their sideways glances, heard their whispered questions. How did she know? Why was she prepared? Who really is Sarah Blake? She offered no answers. She owed them none. She only knew they needed to survive, and her bunker was their only hope. But survival required cooperation, trust, and both were fragile. Sarah knew this because she'd calculated it. Panic could kill them faster than any enemy outside, so she kept the residents busy, assigning tasks, monitoring maintenance rotations, and enforcing strict discipline. Yet even as she worked, her sensors detected new threats building along the horizon. Her drone surveillance picked up movements of larger groups forming alliances among scattered raider bands. They were uniting, coordinating, preparing for a decisive strike. Sarah's stomach tightened. Her calculations had always anticipated external threats, but internal cohesion was a variable she could not fully control. The next attack would test everything she'd built and everyone inside. 3 days later, they came again, organized, angry, and well-armed. This time, the attackers didn't approach on foot. Armored vehicles surged through the mountain passes, modified pickup trucks and jeeps fitted with makeshift armor and heavy artillery. Sheriff Mason stood beside Sarah once more, watching helplessly as drones projected the advancing convoy. "We can't stop them with sound alone," he said grimly. Sarah nodded. "This time we fight." She activated emergency protocols. Sections of the bunker shifted, revealing hidden armories stocked with precision rifles and tactical gear. Townspeople stared in shock as Sarah distributed weapons, swiftly instructing them on defense positions. No one argued now. Fear united them. Explosions rocked the outer defenses. The enemy's first salvos struck the steel gates, echoing thunder through the tunnels. The lights flickered and children screamed. But Sarah remained calm. She activated hidden rocket-propelled deterrents embedded in the mountain walls. Missiles streaked through the night, destroying leading vehicles and scattering the enemy formation. The raiders returned fire. Bullets ricocheted against reinforced walls, harmlessly absorbed by composite shielding. Yet numbers were on their side. Slowly, inch by inch, the attackers advanced. Sarah knew there was only one option left, an option she'd hoped never to use. "Seal the outer tunnels," she commanded through clenched teeth. The townspeople hesitated, knowing the implications. Outside those sealed doors lay neighbors who hadn't made it inside yet. "Do it now," she repeated fiercely, eyes blazing. "Or everyone dies." Sheriff Mason slammed the control console, sealing the steel barriers. The echo of locking mechanisms felt like a betrayal. But Sarah wasn't done. She accessed a secret control sequence, a last resort defensive measure she'd installed years ago, praying it would remain unnecessary. Explosive charges buried strategically beneath the outer access tunnels detonated simultaneously, collapsing corridors in controlled implosions. Hundreds of attackers were buried instantly beneath tons of rock and earth. Dust and silence settled in the control room. Screens flickered dimly. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the survivors inside the bunker looked at Sarah, not with doubt, but with awe and fear. She met their eyes, expression unreadable. Sheriff Mason finally spoke. "Is it over?" "No," Sarah replied softly. "Not yet, but for now we survive." Her words hung heavy, because everyone understood one truth clearly now. Survival would come at a cost higher than any of them imagined. Survival became routine. Sarah restructured life underground. The hydroponic gardens produced food. The air filtration hummed, requiring constant monitoring and filter swaps. Water was recycled again and again. Sarah established strict work rosters. Every adult had a task: farming, maintenance, security, teaching the children, or managing supplies. Order replaced chaos, but anxiety clung to every surface. The townspeople still whispered, some grateful, some resentful. Every few days, Sarah climbed to the observation dome, a small steel room perched above the main bunker, shielded by armored plates but equipped with periscopes and listening arrays. From there, she watched the dead world outside. No lights, no birdsong, only wind and snow. But she also watched the perimeter. Bandits never truly gave up. At night, scavengers picked over the ruined outer defenses, searching for a way in. Sarah rarely had to use force again. Most gave up after seeing the mass grave of the previous assault. Inside, she still worried about trust. The townspeople were safe, but would safety last? Would their fragile unity hold? One night, Sarah awoke to alarms, an air quality alert, a CO2 spike. She sprinted to the environmental controls and found the culprit, a clogged vent. But when she removed the filter, she found it had been deliberately stuffed with rags. Sabotage. Sheriff Mason confronted Tucker and his small circle. At first, they denied everything. Under pressure, a younger man broke down, sobbing, "We just wanted to prove she isn't perfect." Sarah said nothing. She simply fixed the vent, but for the first time, she posted guards near critical systems. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. Mason tried to comfort her. "They're scared. They'll come around." Sarah nodded, but her heart felt heavier than ever. Spring neared, snow began to melt, and hope flickered in the bunker. Supplies were low, but the gardens had their first true harvest. Children brought Sarah fistfuls of lettuce, grinning as if it were treasure. One afternoon, a small group gathered around Sarah in the hydroponic bay. "We want to thank you," an older woman said. "We gave you a hard time, but you saved us." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "I didn't do it for thanks," she said softly. "I did it because nobody else would." From that day forward, more people volunteered for night shifts. Discipline improved, laughter returned quietly around mealtimes. But Sarah never stopped checking the perimeter. She knew threats could come from outside or from within. A month later, the radio crackled for the first time since collapse. Sarah, Mason, and a small group raced to the comms room. Static. Then, a faint, garbled voice. "Survivors, Ridge Valley, anyone?" Sarah tried to reply. Static answered. They took shifts by the radio, hoping for another signal. That night, Sarah wandered the empty corridors, remembering the laughter and insults from years before, how she worked alone in the garage, how she nearly gave up 100 times. Now she was all that stood between life and oblivion. Food ran low again. Sarah led foraging parties, venturing into the ruined town, now haunted by silence and snow. They recovered canned goods, seeds, batteries, anything usable. One day, they found evidence of another group. Footprints in the snow, fires burned low. Allies or new threats? That night, Mason asked, "If you could do it all again, would you?" Sarah looked at him, exhausted but resolute. "I never had a choice," she replied. "When you see what's coming, you can't unsee it. You build or you die." A day later, the radio crackled again. The world, it seemed, was not entirely gone. The bunker, once a machine of survival, had become a crucible. Weeks passed in dim blue light, air thick with the breath of too many people, the hum of filtration systems now an endless heartbeat. Outside, the world lay in ruins. No word from distant cities, no signal, no hope. Only the crackle of static, only the memory of what they had lost. Inside, tension pressed harder than any siege. The townspeople of Pine Ridge, farmers, clerks, old friends, bitter rivals, were forced together in a labyrinth built by the woman they once laughed at. Days blurred into nights. Food grew bland, portions smaller. Water rations tightened. Quarters felt tighter, tempers shorter. Sarah Blake felt every second of it. She never slept. Her cot in the control room was little more than a rumor, unused. Her eyes moved from screen to screen. Oxygen, temperature, supplies, perimeter. She walked the corridors at night, sometimes pausing to rest her forehead against cool steel, feeling the pulse of the generators in her bones. She watched the people who now depended on her. She saw the gratitude in some, the resentment in others. She saw marriages fracture, friendships form under pressure, new leaders rising from old wounds. She saw children learning to tend hydroponic gardens, their laughter rare but precious. She saw adults whisper when she passed, always careful never to meet her gaze too long. The first trouble came from within. A small group, led by a man named Tucker, once the loudest voice mocking Sarah in the cafe, began to question her orders. Why must lights remain so dim? Why can't they use more water? Why isn't the radio working to call for help? Why trust her, the outcast, the paranoid mechanic whose bunker was now their cage? At first, Sarah let it go. She believed in free speech, even here. But as supplies dwindled, discipline cracked. Tucker and his followers sabotaged a water pump in protest, forcing Sarah to initiate rations and brief lockdown. Tension snapped. A fight broke out in the mess hall, stopped only when Sheriff Mason and Sarah intervened. That night, Sarah stood before the community in the main chamber. Her voice, soft but clear, filled the space. "You think this is easy? You think I wanted any of this?" she said. "You have questions. I have answers. But first, you have to survive. If you trust me, you live. If you don't, you die. The world outside is gone. This is what we have. Choose." She left them to their silence. Some cried, some glared, but they obeyed. Discipline returned. Routine became law. Still, Sarah knew, inside this steel mountain, survival was more than a calculation. It was a battle for hope itself. The winter was endless. Snow choked the valley above, sealing the mountain in white silence. Raiders, if any survived, were gone, either fled or frozen. For months, no sound reached the bunker, except the wind moaning through ventilation shafts. Inside, time became elastic. Days measured by hydroponic cycles and ration lines. People made new traditions. Story circles for the children, quiet vigils for the lost, shared meals that were more ritual than nourishment. Sheriff Mason organized night watches, though no threat came. Sarah introduced maintenance workshops, part necessity, part distraction, to keep hands busy and minds occupied. But tension lingered, persistent as mold. Rumors grew. Sarah was hiding a secret exit. Sarah could reach the outside world. Sarah was hoarding supplies. The stories changed with each retelling, but the undercurrent was always the same: fear. One night, a loud bang woke the bunker. A hydroponic pump had failed catastrophically, flooding 2 corridors. Sarah rushed to the scene, wading through knee-deep water, cursing under her breath. It was sabotage. Again, Tucker's group. She found them barricaded in the north module, armed with kitchen knives and metal pipes. Tucker faced her, defiant. "You're not our queen, Sarah. We want out. We want answers. We want the truth." Sarah stared at him for a long, silent moment. "Outside this door," she said finally, "is nothing. Cold, dark, dead. You open it, you kill us all. You want answers? Fine. Here's the truth. I saved your lives. I can't promise more than that. I'm not your queen. I'm your last hope. Make your choice." Tucker, broken, sank to the floor. Sarah ordered the group placed under watch but refused exile or violence. She fixed the pump herself, working until dawn, hands raw and trembling. Word spread. The community rallied behind her, not with cheers but with quiet, determined work. That morning, a radio crackled to life. Static, then a faint voice. "Survivors, North Ridge, repeat, are you there?" The world was not entirely gone. Hope returned slowly. Sarah and Mason rigged the radio to full power, risking precious energy. The signal was real. Another survivor enclave, hidden in a mining complex 30 miles north, battered but alive. The news electrified the bunker. Plans formed. Search parties, alliances, dreams of rebuilding. Sarah moved among the people, listening as they talked. About spring, about home, about a world after the end. Children drew pictures of mountains and sunrises. Old men mapped the valley from memory. Someone carved a wooden plaque, "We survived together." But for Sarah, hope was a careful calculation. Supplies could stretch if rationed. Water pumps needed maintenance. The threat of conflict, both inside and out, never truly faded. As spring thawed the world, Sarah led the first scouting party to the surface. The town above was a graveyard of snow and silence, but the mountains stood firm. She gazed down at Pine Ridge, her home, her torment, her salvation. She looked back at the bunker, now humming with life. For a moment, she allowed herself pride. She remembered every insult, every laugh, every look of doubt, and she smiled. Because they had survived, not because of luck or faith or fate, but because one mechanic, laughed at for years, had refused to give up. Because she built what others couldn't imagine. Because she believed in the value of one prepared soul. Sarah Blake returned to the bunker, ready to begin again. Outside, the world waited. Hard, dangerous, uncertain. But inside, hope was a machine, rebuilt, restarted, stronger than steel.